Welcome, and we'll start off with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
So I am looking to see earlier recordings that we have of these sessions of the same Parsha where we started off. They were on Facebook, they weren't on YouTube, and fortunately they are saved on my page and I can find the links. So I'm going to see if there's any way I can get them posted onto YouTube. David is volunteered to help see about that, but I am finding
My
the
job
links.
is to make college easier.
Okay, all right. Let's go to a share now and see what we can do. There we are. Here we are. So this is where we left off yesterday. So just to catch us up entirely, just to say that Eliezer had asked Rebecca for some water. She had offered not only to give him water, but to make sure that every single camel, and he had 10 camels with him, was also able to get drink as well. We had discussed briefly yesterday about 10 men. I think that was a little bit of confusion because of the 10 camels. There are no other people specifically mentioned in the Torah text that accompanied Eliezer. We might assume that he did not travel alone because it would have been so dangerous. I'm not a camel driver. I know little about camel driving, at least let's say nothing about camel driving. And whether or not one individual could drive 10 camels at a time, I don't know. So, at any rate, that would be one reason why Rebecca in our story doesn't offer to give water to the men who accompanied him. But we had this little discussion yesterday, and after the recording was completed, we were able to check some different things. So that's where we are there. So here is his reaction, Eliezer's reaction. V'ha'ish mishta'eh la. So this word mishta'eh is not so easy to translate. Okay, one of its meanings, though, from the root sha'ah, shin aleph hey, right? And this is a hitpa'el form of this verb. Okay, is to gaze, but it also has a meaning of astonishment as well. So put it all together, and it makes sense in the context that he was looking in astonishment at her. Macharish, that would mean remain silent. He remained silent. Lada'at, to know. Hahitzliach Hashem darko imlo, whether the Lord had made his way successful or not. So the question is, of course, it's looking very much as this was the test that Eliezer had asked God regarding, and here is what is happening now. And let me just see what I can do here. Okay, I am stuck, I'm afraid. It's not, my computer is doing some interesting things. Yep, I'm not able to, there we go. Sorry. Yeah, it's doing a lot of interesting things. Wow. Wow. Okay, let's not do that. Okay, sorry, I'm getting all kinds of, wow. All right, let's get in here. Huh. I apologize, I'm having such troubles. I assume you're watching all this happen in front of you. All right,
Right.
let's see, we are. Okay, all right. So, Rashi. So Rashi is actually, we got this long, relatively for Rashi, comment on this word, right? So mishta'eh, there it is. Lashon she'iyah. It is has the connotation of amazement. Kemi she'u okay, this could mean, okay, she'u arim, and this could be kamo she'u arim, such as the cities lie in waste. So, amazement, in other words, sort of you're sort of set to a point where you just can't say anything. You're just so it's interesting that we have this particular translation, this context, but he gives a whole bunch of them, as you'll see. Tish'eh shmama. Okay. Let's. Okay. Yes, this could be the entire verse from Isaiah, right? So it could be be amazed cities, but this tish'eh, he could be giving a synonym for tish'eh. Shmama has to do with like devastation. Okay, so here we go. Mishta'eh, this particular form of this verb, mishtomim umitbahel. He is amazed to a point of silence, right? That's part of it, that you're left unable to respond. Okay, mitbahel. Normally, bahala has to do with fear, but here, checked out. This is Jastrow and the page in the Jastrow dictionary, and one of the words he gives is for mitbahel is confounded.
How about
Confounded.
dumbfounded?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well done. Well done. Al shira'ah dvarav, because he saw that his words, this deal he had made with God, right? And we discussed how inappropriate that might have been and why it was allowed to pass at the time. Karov lahatzliach, how close his words were to succeed. Aval eino yodea. But here's the point, right? This is why he kept silent and didn't say anything yet, right? Eino yodea, but he didn't know im mishpachat Avraham he im lav. So what he didn't know, and this isn't explicitly stated in the text, right, is whether she was in fact from Abraham's family. Right? He had just met this wonderful young woman, and but he didn't know if she was mishpacha, right? He didn't know about that. Excuse me 1 second. I'm going to try and prevent that from those noises from happening. Okay, so v'al titma, and do not be surprised. And Rashi is now assuming that we have some basic knowledge of Hebrew grammar, right? And specifically of the verb form of the hitpa'el form. Okay, so he says, do not be surprised, but tav shel mishta'eh, with the placement of the tav in the verb, in this form of hitpa'el in mishta'eh, because normally, the way the hitpa'el would be formed is it would be mit and then the verb. So in other words, he's saying, don't be surprised that the fact that the verb takes this form mishta'eh and not mitsha'eh. That's normally the way the hitpa'el works, right? Mitrachetz, mitlabesh, right? To wash yourself, to dress yourself. You notice that the mit precedes, but here the shin and the taf are interchanged, right? So he says, She'en lecha teva, because there's a rule, he's saying, that there is no word, Shetchilat yesoda, where the first letter of its root is a shin, umidaberet belashon hitpa'el, and this is being used, and this verb is being used in the hitpa'el form, okay, belashon mitpa'el, she'en tav mafrida, where there's no case, he's saying, he's putting it in the negative, there's no example of such a form, where the first letter is a shin in the verb, where the tav, double negative here, where the tav does not interpose mafrida bein shtei otiot shel ikar, between the first two letters of the root, ikar hayesod. Kagon, and he gives now examples, right? Mishta'eh, right? Migzerat sha'ah. So the example that we have here, mishta'eh, from the verb sha'ah, or mishtolel, right? This is left, so the shalal would be the root. Or sometimes Hebrew roots that have that double the last two letters are from called ayin vav, where the root is shul, okay, something like that, shin vav lamed. But regardless, mishtolel. Notice the shin, the taf, which is part of the utility element, is put between the first and second letters of the verb. So, senseless. Migzerat sholel, from the root sholel. Veyishtomem, there it is, okay, also in Isaiah chapter 16. Migzerat shmama, from the example of this word shmama, which is again I said was desolation, something like that. Vayishtamer chukot Omri. The laws of Omri were observed. But again, shamar, right? There's a verb you're familiar with, quite possibly. Migzerat vayishmor. Okay? Afkan. So here too, he says, mishta'eh. The word mishta'eh, migzerat tish'eh, right, is astonished. וכשם שאתה מוצא לשון משומם באדם נבהל ונעלם, and just as you find it appropriate to describe a person who is confounded or lost, possibly here, okay, could be, right? But he is mishomem. In other words, he's just either appalled or just this kind of emotional reaction.
Doesn't Elam with an aleph, doesn't that mean mute?
Yeah, mute. It does. I know. So am I looking at ne'elam in the wrong with an ayin then? Is that what I'm translating?
Well, Elam would be like disappeared or lost,
Yeah.
lost.
Yes.
The
That's what I
aleph
was thinking.
Aleph looks like mute.
Yes, I know. It did occur to me that it also means, yeah, I've never seen ne'elam meaning that, at least, but remember, my knowledge of Hebrew and experience of Hebrew is limited. It's not universal. So generally, when I've seen ne'elam, my understanding is lost. But Cherubith, I'm open to your, if maybe I'm spelling it wrong.
You've got an aleph here.
Yes, right? And is ne'elam with an ayin meaning lost?
Correct.
Okay, all right. So thank you. That's my limits are being openly expressed here. Okay. So in other words, silenced. Okay. Uval machshavot. In other words, he's full of thoughts. Right. He's confounded by these thoughts. Kamor, and he gives an example in Job 18. Al yomo nashmu. Acharonim, right? And those who come later, acharonim, those who come later, will be, and there's nashmu, right? Will be astonished regarding his days, about this person's. In other words, people who come later and read and find out about this person's life will be astonished. Okay, shomu shamayim, Jeremiah 2. Be astonished, O heavens. Right? And then Daniel, Eshtomam Kesha'a Chada. This is Aramaic now, okay? Or Ishtomam, perhaps, right? Because it's Aramaic. It means was astonished for a moment, okay? Kach tiparesh lashon she'iyah. This is how you have to understand and explain using this language of she'iyah, ba'adam bahul, regarding a person who is confounded, uval machshavot, and he's just his mind is just going, at 100 miles an hour. For onkelos tinke. Now, interesting, he says, onkelos goes in a whole different direction, right? And okay, so he says mishta'eh. He takes it from lashon shehiyah. Shehiyah means delay, right? Shaha means to delay, and he says Onkelos translates the Hebrew here as meaning to delay. That let me see. Right, I think this is the Gavra Chayyei. In other words, and the man was he held up, right? Shoher v'omed. He just waits, and so in other words, he waits and he stands b'makom echad, in one place, le'ot hahitzliach Hashem darcho, to see if God had had caused his way to be successful, caused him to be successful. So totally different direction to go, but basically coming up with a similar understanding. Ve'ein letagem shtiya, but you cannot understand, you should not be translating this as drinking. Well, remember, one might be tempted to say that mishta'eh meant he was drinking. Rashi says that is incorrect. And the reason why one might do that is because she's just given him water to drink. Okay, so but it's not. Shahare eno lashon shtiya. You cannot take this particular verb and translate it as meaning to drink. She'ein aleph nofelet b'lashon shtiya. Right. So I think what he's saying is that you don't find an aleph in any form of the word shata. Right. That would be the verb, the root form would be shin tet, shin taf, excuse me, hey, or shin taf yud, something like that. Okay, shata, shin taf hey. So you're not going to find an aleph in that form. And here is mishta'eh here in the verb that we see in the text here. So as I said, you can see Rashi has a lot of ink to spill on this particular word. Mishta'eh la. So now he goes on to the fact that he says that la, right, which mean to her. But even though normally la would mean to her, okay, mishtomem aleha. Here it means he is confounded or amazed at her or regarding her, right? Come on. And he gives an example above Genesis chapter 20. Imri, this is where Abraham says to Sarah, and here it is, Imri might normally mean say to me, okay? Achihu, he is my brother. And it doesn't mean that there. There the li is understood as say about me that he is my brother. That when you talk to these people, tell them I'm your brother. So, you could ask, why is Rashi going into this particular detail? And I admit that I would be taking an argument from relative silence, right? But saying this must be, it is possible that there were mistranslations about this, or that the Hebrew is, as you can see, somewhat difficult here. And Rashi wants to make sure that we can translate this accurately and well. Just for those of you who weren't with me at the very beginning, I mentioned that I felt that what prompted Rashi to write this particular interpretation is that when he lived and where he lived, there might well have been a lot of attempts by Christians in his community or in the general community there to proselytize. And of course, Christians interpret the Bible in a way that supports their belief. And Rashi may have felt that that the average Jew of his time didn't have a knowledge of the traditional interpretations and was now left basically helpless to try to answer these particular questions. So that is an agenda that I'm wondering about, and whether that agenda in some way was fitting in with why Rashi goes into the grammar here so much. So just a little bit of background as to what I haven't read anything of a source nature where Rashi says I'm doing it for this reason. It's just I'm just was trying to puzzle as to what might have prompted Rashi to do this. That might be a very serious enterprise. So another example that Rashi gives, uchamor, and similarly, and this is below in chapter 26, vayishalu anshe hamakom leishto, and the men of the place asked to, literally it could mean to his wife, but it doesn't mean that, it means about his wife. So this la, which normally means to or for, right, can sometimes mean about. Lot of grammatical stuff in today's Rashi. going on. Vayhi, and it was so, ka'asher kilu hagmalim lishtot, that when the camels finished drinking. So, by the way, here's this verb, kala. We had it with regards to Sodom and Gomorrah, which means to end, right? When the camels ended drinking, vayikach ha'ish nezem zahav, the man took a gold nose ring, beka mishkalo. This is an incredible, you're going to see an incredible little piece of literary suggestion that the rabbis pulled out of this, because the argument would be, why Dafka tell you the weight of it? How important is it, as opposed to just saying he took a gold nose ring, but to tell us specifically that it was a beka of weight, ushnei tzmidim, and 2 bracelets, al yadeha, for her hands. Again, asara zahav mishkalam, 10, again, we could assume 10 beka possibly, of zahav mishkalam, their weight, right? Whatever, but it just says 10 of gold, their weight. So let's take a look. You go ahead.
I was wondering why he gave her the gold nose ring and the rings on her hand. He didn't know her yet, but he was doing that for generosity that she did to him, probably.
I think so. I think he was paying her. She had just done something lovely. And again, there's a certain sensitivity about people doing you favors. That when people do you favors, they put you in a position where you feel they owe you. And there was actually a practice of shopkeepers to give children sweets and things so that their parents would buy in their store, because the sense of being obligated to someone puts you in a strange kind of position. There was actually a rabbi of an Amora, right, back, a Talmudic rabbi mentioned in the Talmud. He's one of the major rabbis there, where it was said about him, he never accepted gifts from anyone. He did not want to feel obligated in some way, because it certainly would. And they talk about taking gifts, and especially if you act as a judge. And rabbis very often were dayanim, and he did not want to he would have had to excuse himself or recuse himself if he was asked for a bet din, if he was accepting gifts. So just interesting side issues there that we don't always think about. But let's make sure we get into the Rashi here, because he's going to tell us the reason why we are given this kind of detail in the text, right? So he says, Beka, there we go, right? Beka. Remez, this is an allusion, right? It's simply a suggestion. The Shkalei Yisrael, regarding the time when the Israelites were to be counted. And remember, when they counted the Israelites, it was Beka legulgolet, right? Literally, it means a Beka, which happens to be a half shekel to each skull. In other words, I guess that would be a poll tax.
Yeah.
Right. So this is an allusion to what would ultimately show up later on. Again, I think that one could say more about this. Let's just keep going though. Ushnei tzmidim, 2 bracelets. And this is a remez. This is a remez. This is a way of interpreting the Torah in this sort of elusive kind of way. Lishnei luchot metzumadot, referring to the 2 tablets which were joined one to another. And you all have that picture of the 2 tablets, right? That are joined one to another. That's generally the way we depict the 10 commandments. And then asara zahav mishkalam, right? So 10 half shekels, right? They're assuming that we're talking about bekas again, their weight. And here he says, I guess you can all figure it out at this point, Remez la'aseret hadibrot shebahem, a reference to the 10 commandments that were on that were on these tablets. So, what's interesting here, and what we might meditate and play with, is that we have three different themes here. Two of them are related, right? The bracelets and the weight of the bracelets, and also the counting of the census of the Jewish people, and the fact that these three elements are brought together. And of course, I think on a very simplistic level, it's an allusion to the fact that they are interdependent, that in keeping the mitzvot, right, the Ten Commandments, which are the basis of the Torah, right, that this is what will lead to the success and the population of the Jewish people and the Israelite religion. And here's, I think, an important little part, is that for Abraham and Sarah, having a child was all about having a future. And that the whole idea, because it says explicitly in the Torah that Abraham would want to make sure that what he had discovered and what he was trying to bring to the world would have a future to it. And that's what this is talking about when it's talking about the census of the Jewish people, after they came out of Egypt. So here in this little verse, we see something amazing in the fact that why the Torah would go to such lengths to actually talk about the weight of these particular items. I mean, truly, it seems irrelevant. And here, in fact, here's an example of something that superficially seems irrelevant and yet actually has quite a deeper association with it. And I think this is a good place for us to stop for today, and we'll go on with God's help. Now, tomorrow, hopefully we'll be able to do that. And I'm just going to mark the spot. Okay. Right there. And I'm going to stop the share and say farewell to those who have joined us on the YouTube video, and hopefully see you soon.